What's up everyone, my name is Gary Blackwood, also known as GazzyB123, and welcome to episode 11 of the GazzyB Poker Vlog. We're going to get straight into today's session, but first things first, a massive congratulations to the two winners that you can see on your screen. Both of you guys guessed as close to correct as possible for the Millionaire Maker Day 2 chip stack in terms of the breakdown of the chip denominations, and given it is a stone cold tie, we're going to chop it up. So I cashed for about $8,000. You guys are going to get half of 1% of that. Yes, $40-ish each. Find me on Twitter, Instagram, all the relevant places. Get in touch and I will send you your bounty. Congratulations to you guys. For the rest of you watching, fear not, there's another massive giveaway coming soon. Find out what that is at the end of this video. On to today's video. We're playing 5, 10, 20 in the Ario Casino in Las Vegas. Really fun session, lots of big pots, lots of great action. Let's check it out. Before we get into today's no limit hands, I actually sat down at a PLO table for 45 minutes while I was waiting for the game to start. The PLO games at the Aria are very good. There's a lot of action, lots of tables to choose from. However, I'm not very good at PLO, as you're about to see. The graphics are really difficult to make for PLO hands, so we're going to whiz through them very quickly. We're playing 5-5 with a rock. For those that don't know, the rock is the mandatory straddle that players have to put out when they win the pot. First hand of the day, I pick up Ace, King, Queen, Jack, single suited. There's been two limps before me. I'm in MP. I raise to $50. Both limpers call and we go three ways to the flop. It's a really good flop for us. We've got top pair, an inside wrap, and the second nut flush draw. So when it's checked to me, I bet out $110. Really unfortunate for us that both players fold. We're doing really well against their continuing range. However, I'm not complaining. It's always nice to drag in the first pot of the day. Next up, we've got King, King, 7-5, single diamonds, and open to $35 in the cutoff. The button is a very loose, fun player. He makes the call. The big blind looks like a pro. He makes it $140 to go. This is a very easy peel for us, given that we're almost always going to go three ways, and our hand can flop really well. The flop is Queen, 6, deuce, rainbow, which looks like a pretty safe board for kings, but when the big blind decides to pot it and there's a player behind, I decide to go ahead and make the fold. The button folds very quickly as well, and the big blind turns over, pocket aces, shocker. Not long after these two hands, I lost a few silly pots in a row. I got a little tilted. I decided to turn the camera off, have a little bit of fun, play a few hands, and I proceeded to spew my guts out for 30 minutes and lose $911 playing the devil's game. I made a mental note to never play it again. It's the 328th time I've made this note, but hopefully this time lucky. Eventually the 5-10 game starts and the whole table agrees to play 5-10-20 from the get-go, and we're excited to be in there battling. It takes about 20 minutes for us to play our first significant hand. We're in the small blind with pocket Kardashians and raise to $70. The big blind makes it $250 to go. It's a dream spot for us, no messing about. We put in the 4-bet to 600s. The big blind starts the hand with about 2,500. We're super happy to call it off versus a jam. We're super happy to play a 4-bet pot with kings if she flats. What we're not super happy about, however, is if she min 5 bets, which is exactly what she does. She makes it $1,300 to go and the alarm bells are ringing. Still, I didn't fly all this way to fold kings pre-flop. I 6-bet jam for $2,500 and her chips are in the middle faster than mine. She's got pocket aces. It's the ultimate cooler and we're at the mercy of the dealer. Unfortunately for us, there's no help and we're down 2.5k very early in the game. No time to feel sorry for ourselves though, it's time to go into grind mode. Not long after that, we pick up Ace Queen off in the small blind. There's been two limps. I make it $100 to go. The big blind calls, one of the limpers calls, and we go three ways to Ace 9-6 with two clubs. It's a really good flop for us and I see no reason not to bet this hand. I bet $120. The big blind makes the call and we're heads up to the turn. It's a pretty good turn for us. We've turned top two pair, but we're out of position and the flush is also completed as well. So I decide to check. My opponent thinks for a few seconds and checks back. The river is an offsuit 7 and I decide that given my opponent has checked back the turn, it's a pretty clear value bet for us. I bet $380. My opponent calls very, very quickly. I turn over my hand, he taps the table, he mucks, and we're heading in the right direction for getting out of the hole for this session. A few orbits go by until we next pick up a playable hand. We've got red 10s on the button. The hijack opens, I decide to flat this time, the small blind calls, the big blind calls as well, and we go 4 ways to ace queen 6 with 2 hearts. The action somehow checks round and the turn is an offsuit jack. The small blind leads out for $110, both the other players fold, and I think for a few seconds before deciding to raise to $380. Her sizing doesn't really scream super nutted to me. We've got straight blockers and she's shown herself to be quite passive in a few spots since our aces versus kings hand. She thinks for a few seconds and decides to fold queen jack offsuit face up. I cannot resist, I immediately turn over 10-10. After the pocket 10s bluff, I didn't pick up any playable hands for a long time. However, patience is the name of the game in stretches like this. After a while, I took a 15-minute break to stretch my legs, came back, folded in a bomb pot, and then picked up pocket kings once more in the double straddle. Hopefully they'll serve us better this time. The button limps for 40, the small blind calls, a tight player in the big blind makes it 240 to go. I make it $720, it folds back round to the button who looks as if he's ready to play for it all, but unfortunately decides against it. The small blind folds, the big blind quickly folds as well. Not as big a pot as we would have liked to have won with a pair of kings, but at least nobody had aces this time. A little while later, I pick up an extremely pretty ace-king of hearts in the small blind and open to $70. The big blind folds, the straddle defends, we go heads up to ace, ace, 10 rainbow. I'm betting my entire range here for a small size on all paired ace, king and queen boards, so I bet $50 here. The straddler quickly makes it $150 to go. I don't want to 3-bet here and narrow his range, I want to keep all his bluffs in his range, so I go ahead and make the call. The turn brings a flush draw, I check, and unfortunately for me, my opponent checks back. The river completes the flush, but I'm not too worried about that. I think he'd continue to barrel on the turn if he had picked up a flush draw, and there are a lot of queen jack and king jack hands that might call. Maybe a hand like jack 10, and once in a blue moon my opponent can have a worse ace. So I bet $300 here, and unfortunately for us, my opponent folds very quickly. Next up, a very fun player has opened under the gun. I'm in the small blind with king jack offsuit and make a looser than normal call. This definitely isn't a standard call for me, but I'm happy to widen my range against certain players and get into the pots with them wherever possible. This hand for sure makes it in. We go heads up to 10-9-7 with 2 clubs. I check and my opponent checks back. The turn is a 10 and I take a stab here with my double gutter and my 2 overcards to the board for $100. My opponent thinks for a few seconds and makes the call. The river is a complete brick and I decide to continue to tell my story. I try and apply maximum pressure. I bet $460 here. I'm trying to fold out hands like pocket 8s, 7-6 suited, all those sort of weak 1-pair hands that my opponent can certainly have. What I didn't expect from my opponent was for him to think for a second and then call it off with pocket 4s for maximum pain. It's a great call from my opponent, but I make a mental note not to bluff this guy ever again, and we move on. The next 2 hands happen quite literally back to back. The first one is a pretty simple hand, but I think it might be relevant to the one after. The player from the above hand opens an early position, the hijack calls, and for the 3rd time today, I'm putting in a 3-bet with pocket kings, this time from the straddle. The razor calls and we're heads up to a very safe looking 10-6 deuce flush draw flop. I bet around half pot, and unfortunately for us, my opponent folds very quickly. The very next hand, the same player opens from under the gun, the same player calls, and I squeeze my beautiful pocket queens, this time from the big blind. The straddle cold calls, it's the same player who had aces earlier. The original oper calls, and we go 3 ways to a very similar looking flop as the last hand. I decided to check this time with the intention of check shoving versus the under the gun player. Interestingly, the straddle leads out for $540. Under the gun folds, and given how passive she is, I decide to call with the intention of playing very conservatively versus her on future streets. The turn pairs the top card and I check. She thinks for a second and checks back. The river is a very interesting card. It's another 10. My opponent has been very tight, but I feel like we have the best hand a lot here given the action. It does feel like trying to get blood from a stone, but I decide to bet the river. I bet $1,100. My opponent goes deep into the tank. She looks very exasperated, and by now I'm pretty confident I have the best hand. While she's tanking, I do a bit of math in my head, and if she pays us off here, we're almost out the hole for the day. She eventually decides to match my wager. I turn over my pocket queens, and thankfully for us, she mucks her cards and we scoop in a very nice pot. On to our final hand of the night, and it's a bit of a messy one, but stick with me because it's a lot of fun. Under the gun limps, under the gun +1 limps, I call in the small blind with pocket sixes, the straddle checks, and when the dealer pulls in all the money and puts the flop out, under the gun asks the dealer why they didn't give him the option to raise or check. As the dealer is explaining to him that he was not the straddle but he was in fact under the gun, I decided to stab the flop with my sixes. I'm going to have the best hand a lot of the time, there's a bit of value to be had, my hand is going to need a lot of protection as well. Here is where things get interesting. Under the gun shakes his head and then tries to show under the gun +1 his cards. Under the gun +1 says, whoa, 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 I'm in the hand. This screams kings or aces to me always. Under the gun then calls my flop stab, and under the gun +1 then raises my $60 stab to $170. At this point, I'm absolutely sure that under the gun has an overpair, and under the gun +1 has flopped a set of fives or deuces. I know I'm way behind, but if I call this $110 raise and somehow find a way to turn a six, I could win a gargantuan pot. So I make the call, under the gun makes the call, and just as the dealer is about to deal the turn, a hush descends over the Aria Casino. There's a burst of energy, the planets align, the moon and the stars become one, and the turn is the six. Just kidding, of course it's not a six, it's an offsuit 4, check check, the guy with the set bombs it, I fold, and when they get to showdown, under the gun is aces, and the other guy has a set of fives. Stick a six out there, dealer, one time! Not long after that hand, I decided to rack up for the day. I was in a bit of a hole early on, but I managed to climb out of it and win a small amount playing Hold'em. With the PLO losses included, I was down a very pleasing $650 for the day overall. Not the end of the world when you consider I was down about 3.5k at one point. That brings us to the end of today's session. Really hope you guys enjoyed the show. I had a lot of fun making this vlog. Big shout out to the Aria Casino in Las Vegas for allowing me to film my whole cards and make this vlog. I will definitely be back there before the end of my trip. On to today's giveaway. I'm really excited about this one, guys. I'm giving away 3% of my action in this year's main event. The top prize in the main event is normally about $10 million, so 3% of that will be pretty tasty for someone. All you have to do to be in with a chance of winning is sub to the channel, like this video, and comment below how many chips you think I am going to bag at the end of day one. We play 5 2-hour levels. We start with 60,000 chips. Last year I bagged 330,000 chips at the end of day one. It was very exciting. All you have to do to be in with a chance of winning 3% of my main event action, like this video, sub to the channel, put a comment below how many chips you think I am going to bag at the end of day one. Good luck to everyone. See you next time.